Welcome to Magicians Talking Magic. My name is Ryan Joyce.
My name is Grimazing. Thank you so much for tuning into this very special interview where we have Ryan and myself and returning guest, Joe Diamond. Joe, thanks for being here again on Magicians Talking Magic.
Thanks for having me back.
Snapping.
Appreciate it. Triple snaps. I'm coming to you from the exact same place I was last time, except I got slightly better microphones. So that's been the growth in the pandemic.
The upgrade. Well, okay. So talking about the pandemic and virtual magic, we're basically a year mark, doing virtual magic shows now consistently. What is your perspective looking back 1 year on virtual magic shows?
For myself, awesome. Like I love it. And yes, everyone goes like, well, it's not live. Well, I don't think Doug Henning complained that his show seen by millions of people live. Oh, I couldn't see everyone. We can see people. It's not the same, but it does just as important things in my opinion. I think that, the amount of people who messaged me saying, oh my God, this is what I needed. It was so great. And like all things, there's, you take the good with the bad. There's great Zoom shows. There's not great Zoom shows. I mean, I think a big part of it too is like, it's funny how like magicians are saying the same thing that we as magicians have been told, which is, oh, I saw a Zoom show and it just didn't work. And we've all had like a potential client or someone going, oh, I saw a magic show once and it wasn't for me. It's like, wait, you saw one show and just decided. And so the fact that like magicians themselves have been doing that, I think is kind of strange. It's also showed me just how much, again, without getting too much into it, how much like soul-sucking energy vampires magicians are basically admitting they're saying. Like whenever I see a magician say, oh, I'm the kind of magician that really feeds off the audience's energy. It's like, yeah, welcome to performing. That ain't special. Like did Lin-Manuel Miranda turn down writing music for Moana because, the music was going to be done in front of a live audience because, oh, I need the feedback. No, it's all part of the same thing. Yes, some of them are meant to like do different things, but like to me it's just like complaining like a stage routine doesn't do what a close-up routine does. Like to me it's just like a non-issue. Like of course it doesn't. Of course, you're not going to get the kind of reaction doing, we were talking about the appearing helicopter before we recorded. As amazing as that is, you're not going to get that same gut reaction as when someone opens their hand and 20 sponge balls come out, or their thought of card is turned over in the deck. Of course you're not going to get the same reaction. And I think rather than trying to point out the weaknesses, try to really see the advantages, which is we can perform for people all over the world. I mean, I got to perform for people in the UK, Brazil, India. I was on a podcast in India this year. Like, are you kidding me? And as a result too, for me, like I've had to really, because I'm so localized, I'm used to promoting my in-person show, like, very local and staying, in the Midwest and so forth. But because I was on, national radio shows like Coast to Coast, I got to sell tickets all over the country and beyond off of that one appearance. And some of those people came back. Some people are making plans. They're saying their next trip or their first big trip after the pandemic is going to come to the Chicagoland area because one of the things they want to do is come see me live. And like that would have never happened. I keep hearing people going, oh, now that live's coming back, there's not going to be as much of a demand for virtual. I think that's right. I think those of us who don't have huge internet followings or Netflix shows are going to have a harder time selling like weekly tickets going forward. But I think there's no reason like we can't do monthly shows or I think corporate work for virtual is here to stay. I mean, because so many corporations have figured out like, oh, this meeting could have been an email. Like they finally figured it out this last year. And some companies are just now going to be more, spread out. They realize, oh, this person who's perfect for the job, yeah, isn't in our state, but they can zoom in and, work from home and do just as good of a job. They don't have to move and relocate, and we don't have to do all that. So I think companies are going to be looking for more, things virtually. And of course, that's where we can come in and have good, entertaining, segments and sessions and shows and workshops, which aren't the usual, like, okay, here's the budget and everything else. I mean, I think the pitch, I make your Zoom meeting less boring, is, perfect. That's all they need to know. And even I've noticed with some of the live and in-person shows, for anyone who doesn't know, I specialize more in, mentalism and bizarre type stuff. But it's great to do mind reading and then have people go, wait, you can do this over Zoom? It's like, yeah, I've read minds of people, in, other countries in real time. I got to do a show for, LinkedIn in Washington, D.C. and didn't have to leave the house, didn't have to fly out and everything. And that's the other thing with the companies. Like, oh, they don't have to fly us in. They don't have to, get the banquet hall. They don't have to make sure there's a crusty old microphone working. There's so many things that are just easier now with Zoom. And I think there will be a market for it. I mean, I think it's going to kind of be like any market. There was the big, comedy club boom in the late 80s, early 90s. And the ones that really thrived in that, your Matt Kings and everyone, stayed on top, and everyone else kind of, drifted away. And I'm sure that's going to happen with virtual. But I think I think there will always be a market for someone who has a good show, whether it's in person or virtual.
Awesome. The one thing that you were kind of describing there too was, there's some performers that said, I don't want to do this virtual thing. I can't do it. But, and I think I share the sentiment of continue to do virtual shows because I need to continue to express myself in a magical way. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm getting physical applause or not, I had things that I wanted to say or do creatively. I still wanted to explore magic and not just sit on my hands. Do you think you experienced a lot of creative growth over this past year too, even knowing they were just virtual shows?
Absolutely. So I love how in the last year, we were talking about this before we hit record too. I love how in the last year, the Impossibility books have gone from, oh yeah, these are kind of cute, I don't really do a lot of these, to like the most sought after. Do you have 3? I don't have 3. Do you know where I can get 3? It's sold out everywhere. Oh, I need Subsequent. Who has Subsequent? Is there anything good? Like the fact that literally overnight. Now I have always gotten them because I used to host a radio show, and I would do Impossibility effects as filler or segments or teases, like, hey, get a deck of cards because at the end of the show tonight, we're going to do something over the radio. So between that and verbal magic, also, I've done a lot of Facebook lives, Instagram lives. So when this hit last year, within the first month, I did 3 Facebook lives, 3 1-hour Facebook lives, and did not repeat any material. So that's the mountain of material I had within the first month of between, beginning of March and April 1st, 2020. And that's a lot of material, front loaded right at the start for sure. And so a big part of it at the beginning, was just figuring out what material worked. This was so the opposite of how I normally write shows, because I normally think, what experience do I want the audience to have? What do I want them to have to be the takeaway? What's the journey I want to get? What's the last moment I want? Okay, how do we, we talked about this last time, Graham, I want the end of the show to be everyone surrounding a table with me at it, blindfolded at a Ouija board. How can I use the previous 59 minutes to get us there? So it's not jarring and it makes sense and it's mystical and mystifying and cool. And none of that applied with the first few virtual shows. It was just like, oh, this trick works.
Right.
We'll do it. Awesome. Invisible deck, wave, it works. Let's do it. And so, but it really, I really learned how much and I remember one of the first things I saw at the beginning was like, oh, nothing's going to be amazing unless it happens on their end of the screen. That was something someone said on one of the chat rooms, Facebook groups and everything. And like just how wrong that's been proven to be, just
Right.
how absolutely wrong that has proven to be. And I actually incorporated into my show. So as kind of a structure. So I start off like, full disclosure, my opening routine in my virtual show is Max Maven's Brave. I love it. Graham, we expressed our love for it last time. And
Yeah.
that's my opener for 90% of the shows. I have a couple other openers that I do now, but vast majority it's been that. And then there's some things that use the whole audience, like some body magic stuff and some psychological forces and so forth. And they also are following along with things. They do pendulum work where people make pendulums, but it's a very clear distinction where as the show progresses, more and more of it happens on their end of the screen. So it starts off on my end, but as we go along, more and more stuff is happening to where a pendulum's moving in their own hands and their thought of card, despite how much they shuffled or lied, is on top of everyone's packet at the end. And I read one person's mind and knew they were lying and everything. Like the fact that all of that progresses is, again, to me, like just shows the strength that this can have and how, yes, people do instinctually realize that, but the fact that I was able to take that aspect of it and make it part of like a behind the scenes theme of the show was kind of fun for me. And of course I finally found a theme of, parapsychology and all this other stuff. And I'm very happy with where it went. And I ended up being able to do some stuff that I don't think anyone else was doing in their Zoom shows as well. So like there was some really fun moments and I got messages from other magicians and mentalists. Like just for example, one thing I was doing in virtual shows was psychometry readings. They weren't sealed in envelopes or anything. People were just holding objects up to their camera. We talked about how cool those objects were. I held my hands up to my camera and just gave a straight ahead, cold reading about it. If you read stuff like Richard Webster's books and everything, you can learn how to give a genuine reading based on an object. And it turns out you don't have to hold the object. You can just do it through the screen. And it was funny because I had magicians message me going, wait, you were doing that for real? You didn't pre-show them? You didn't know what object you were going to get? It's like, no, just, and I liked that kind of boldness with it as well. And I'm excited to still be doing it post the summer. So go ahead,
well, interaction is like a real key aspect that makes magic shine
Yes.
in the virtual environment. But as I say that, and as I think that, it's really what makes magic shine and be unique anyways. And that includes being like on stage. It's a very interactive experience, unlike music and such as instead of being one way, magic is very two-way show based. And speaking of being back on stage, you have actually done that, right? You've been back on stage.
So I did some in the springtime. So I live right on the Wisconsin-Illinois border in the U.S. Wisconsin, Illinois, who have had complete opposite approaches to the pandemic, but they've been equally great and awful in all ways you can imagine, like, and just at opposite ends of the spectrum with everything. From the beginning, because it's funny because I live in Wisconsin, but a lot of my friends and family live in Illinois, so I hear about all that and all the back and forth. So I made a big deal of so I, without getting too heavy into it, my wife and I did test positive for COVID at the end of 2020, 3 weeks before our wedding on Friday the 13th. That's on us. We tempted fate. That's on us. But turns out if you want to get married on Friday the 13th during a pandemic, the venue gives you a deal. So, we saved a ton of money. Hashtag worth it. No, but
congratulations, by the way, too.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But at the same time, like we really wanted, we took everything safe. We monitored our temperatures and everything, and we were well past our contagious by date, and we still masked and social distanced, even though it was like less than 20 of us. So like, I just was like, okay. And I had a couple requests to do some in-person stuff as early as January. And I was like, let's wait. Even when they were like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I did a couple online school events, and I did one in-person college, which was very close by to where I live. They were taking everything seriously. They had it in the big chapel. It was funny. That chapel seats like a couple hundred people. So it's very spacious. And there were only like 50 people socially distanced and masked in there. And that I felt comfortable with.
Were there restrictions? Were you, what was that like? Like, what was
so,
it?
So the rules in Wisconsin at that time were, if you were a speaker on stage, so if you were doing church or whatever, if you were on stage by yourself, you could be unmasked as long as you're over that 6 foot distance. And so while I was on stage, yeah, I was unmasked, but as you know, with mentalism, you need people to come up and at least say stop as you're flipping through a book or whatever. So I actually put together I had done these effects before, but adjusted my methods to where I had a 90% no contact 45-minute mentalism show. So the only contact there was with people. When I brought people on stage, I put on a mask. If I stepped out into the audience, I put on a mask. And the only items that they had to handle, the only items that spectators had to hold were 2 pieces of paper, 2 pencils, and 1 deck of cards. And the pieces of paper, they got their pieces of paper and pencils in Ziploc baggies that I sanitized before the show. I gave those to them. And then when I took them back and returned to stage, I took my mask off and worked from the stage. And when I stepped out into the audience to have stuff selected, and the other thing too, that's the other thing in mentalism, like you want to do a variety of choices, right? You don't want to just say stop the whole time. So I kind of got around that by saying, normally I would just have you pick one or touch one, but since we can't do that, I'm just going to have you say stop for everything in the show. So that way it didn't feel like, oh, we're saying stop again. I still tried to keep it to a minimum for sure. But and then there was a moment where someone cut a deck of cards and looked at the bottom card of the packet. But I made a big deal. They came up, we each did hand sanitizer, and I actually made a whole thing about how, hey, when we're just communicating with masks, we're just communicating with our eyes. And so I want to see if we can communicate with just our eyes. This was, I'll tip it because he's awesome and more people should do this effect. I was doing something by Boris Wild called Pure Telepathy. If you want to look into it, I won't tip it here because of course it's his marketed thing, but this was the effect. And his whole thing is he's not going to talk during it. But I was like, I made a big deal of like, I'm not going to talk and we're just going to watch each other's eyes. We're going to communicate. We've only been able to communicate for the last year using just our eyes. So much has been cut off. Let's see how far we can take that. So we both hand sanitized beforehand because we were each going to use the same packet of cards. But it was also nice to have like a silent part of the mentalism show as well. And would you say had stage rest or anything? How did it feel to be back on stage in the first time in a year? It felt great. It felt really, really great because of Zoom. It didn't feel foreign and it didn't feel rusty because, we've been keeping up our performance skills, for this whole time with doing virtual. So it definitely felt different just because it wasn't the material I was doing before. And I'll be honest, I haven't become a germaphobe, but even before the pandemic, I was definitely starting to realize, I'm reaching into a bowl of slips of paper that 50 people in the audience all touched with their grubby hands, and I'm swirling my hand in it to pick billets out of. Like, do I want to be doing this? Like
I was restaurant, the amount of times I put a chosen playing card in my mouth. Yeah, right. Like now, I'm so happy I'm still alive.
Just like dangling from the mouth, like between the teeth. Even that now, I'm like, I don't want to do that. friend of mine is dipping back into in person, and we're gonna work an event together after the summer. And I was like, "What's your set list gonna be?" And he mentioned sponge balls. I was like, "Dude, are you gonna sanitize them between sets?" He's like, "Oh, it's COVID or not?" Like we now like really think about like, oh, magicians probably don't wash those sponge balls or sponge rabbits nearly as much as they should or say they do. So that's fun to think about.
What would you say the audience's vibe was? What do you think they felt?
So it was a college audience, and the other cool thing about this audience, so this was for college in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and it's where Dr. Tony Barnhart teaches a psychology of magic class. He's done a lot with the science of magic and everything else, incorporates it into the classroom. They actually have in their lab an eye tracker, and one of the things they use to test it is a video of a top change. It's really fascinating stuff. So it's cool that like we get to hang out and have lunch and everything. So there are people so when he does his class, before he passed away, his class went down to Simon Aronson's apartment where him and his wife showed their collection, did their 2-person act. So like, imagine being a college student and like being like, oh, magic seems kind of interesting. And then like, you're at Simon Aronson's apartment. Like, so these are like, they're not lay people. They're not, I wouldn't say they're professional magicians, but they've taken all the knowledge we have and have crammed it into like one semester by the time we get to them. So they still have an appreciation of it. They have like an artistic and psychological appreciation, while at the same time still reacting like lay people, which is a lovely blend. And because of that, a lot of whenever someone magic or mentalism related on campus comes, they, word spreads, and there's a good following of it. So that like about half of the audience were people who had done that class, and the other half were like their friends and roommates and such. So they were thrilled to be able to, see a live show and interact and to be part of it. One of my mantras, my friend Karen Henning, she used to do sword swallowing. Her brother does magic, and she does like tea leaf reading, and she does tattoo artistry as well. And she talked about her definition of magic, which I've kind of taken on, is magic allows people to be the hero of their own story. Like good magic is about the magician, great magic is about the audience, or at least us. And I think that, it's another quote that's coming to mind is that Bill Watterson quote, which is the more personal you make something, ironically, the more universal it becomes. And, mentalism, mental magic, and close-up magic as well, even sponge balls, gets right to the heart of that. It gets right to that person's being the hero of the story. Quick side tangent, because I don't think we covered this last time. I'll cover it briefly now just in case. But I love that idea because when people we've all heard the story. Oh my God, I met a magician. He put a red ball in my hand. When I opened my hand, I had 2. Well, we know the other half of that effect is the magician takes theirs and makes it vanish, and it teleports into their hand. And when you ask them, what was the name of the magician? Oh, I have no idea. So this is, to me, is just further proof that magic makes people the hero of their own story. That person tells the story to the point where the magician's name and the other half of the effect is completely edited out of their memory of that story. They are now the hero of that story. That I held on to something, opened my hand, and there were 2 or 12 or whatever it may be. So I think that's why magic in particular has flourished so well with the virtual realm, because it gets right to the heart of that. Like the really good virtual shows, even if they're not doing stuff on the spectator's end of the screen, a good virtual show incorporates the audience, talks with them, gets their questions, and you can still have a good vibe with people through a camera. And I think the people in that first show in the springtime, it really got to the heart of that. Quick side note, I again, without going into, I won't name any clients or potential clients, but I won't lie, what was the hardest this last spring was I was getting nearly daily emails from schools wanting me to do their in-person proms. Now, theoretically, they were being safe. They were doing it in groups of 50, bringing them in, doing the group, they'd be masked and moved. Well, a lot of the schools in Illinois are already vaccinated, the teachers at least, and I was in Wisconsin, still wasn't, and I was waiting until I was fully vaccinated to start doing like more in-person shows like that. Again, that one college were nearby, everyone was masked, they took it seriously. I had a no contact show, monitored my temperature and everything, to make sure I was safe and the audience was safe. But when you're doing that with groups of 50 at a time, like if you do 5 shows for groups of 50 at a time in a row, you have still performed for 250 people. Like this was still only like this one show was only one. And like I was trying to communicate with these schools, like, no, I passed a lot of them on to a friend of mine who is a teacher full-time and a mentalist part-time. And he was already vaccinated. So he was able to do, because he was already an educator, because he was also in the state. I mean, that's the other thing too, whether I caused it or not, if there was an outbreak at a prom and the parents found out they brought in an out of state, entertainer that was in front of all of their kids, like I just did not want to deal with that. And one of the schools I booked for a virtual event, originally their plan was to have me on a screen. Just on a screen, and kids would come in 50 at a time and watch the screen. I was like, no, that's the worst of all possible worlds. That's the worst aspects of a stage show and a virtual show. Part of the advantages of a virtual show is we can see everyone's faces. And they were like, well, okay, we'll give them all laptops in the gymnasium. I'm like, no, because if I unmute one person, they're all in the same room. Like, and if I unmute, Susan, what's going to stop him over there going, oh, Susie, he picked you, like teenagers. So they were like, okay, we'll have them all in like different classrooms. So have them in like groups of 5 in like 10 classrooms. Fine. And then it just slowly fall apart. They were like, well, because originally I was like, well, here's the thing that you have to think about. If there's an outbreak at your school, none of this could be a case. So we made it so where the 50% deposit, could be used for an in-person, not in person, but one show for everyone at once that same week. Which is basically how I'm going to be treating in-person events now. If they are canceled due to health restrictions or anything, if the in-person event is canceled, they can do a virtual show, that within that week. And that way, it works with the deposit and everything. And she said initially, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Well, when all this started happening where they weren't going to have enough computers. And then there was this, and in my head, I was thinking like, are they going to sanitize the computers and headphones between every set? Like, and they said, oh, we'll make sure all the kids have decks of cards and everything. And again, I won't say the name of the school, but this woman who was the client and the contact was being very difficult and very like making it out like it was my fault. Like I wasn't being flexible. It's like, I have designed an all new show that's less than a year old. I have condensed it down to 20 minutes. So that way I can, repeat it for you. I've set aside an entire evening. Because again, the other upside of virtual shows is you're one and done. You're done and you leave. And this was going to be, several back to back. And it was like, and she's like, well, can we use this as a credit for an in-person show? I was like, no, I am not booking in-person shows until I have a vaccine in me. Yes, I'm planning on getting it soon, but anything can happen. Like I'm not planning anything for the fall currently. And also you're being difficult. I don't want to be stuck with you in the fall.
I shared, I can share a sentiment with you too. When I would have various requests, I changed my entire website. It just says Virtual Magic. There's no other service I offer right now because where we're located, we're still at we're just outside of lockdown, and for a performer to even perform, it doesn't happen until level 3, whatever that means here. And it's like months away for us.
And we're at level 4 and level 5 in some areas.
Well, I'm a level 7 wizard, so I just don't fit anywhere.
Well, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
But we're hoping, I think our perspective is maybe the winter time or the fall might be our opportunity for something. But I also dealt with these tricky clients who were pushing to make something impossible happen. And it was a hard conversation to have, to be like, listen, I appreciate you trying to make this happen, but we have to respect what's going on. And it's a hard conversation to have, because it's just a liability on us as performers. And you also don't want the negative review, but you also don't want the negative review from someone just asking you for a request. It's a really difficult thing to manage. Tell us about, like, you're fully vaccinated, so you're featured in this Illusion show. Tell us about the Illusion show. Tell us about, are you taking precautions in this show to give us like the global scope of of entertainment?
So in Wisconsin, they've been able to do shows since last year, as long as they have less than 50 people, and everyone is masked. So this is a little bit of what happened last summer. They were doing their shows, and they were like, well, okay, let's take all the audience participation tricks out. So when you're doing back-to-back illusions, stuff like suspended animation and, other physically demanding illusions, turns out when you do that without having a break of bringing a kid on stage and having 10 minutes of shtick, turns out it's very draining. And so this is a funny story. So this is the Tristan Christ Magic Theater in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And his fiance and assistant in the show and partner in the business, Shannon, is literally my oldest friend. When I was 3 and she was 2, my mom was her daycare provider. So we've known each other since we were literally in diapers. My mom has those embarrassing pictures of us like in the tub as kids because we got chocolate pudding all over us, at lunchtime. Like, that's how long I've known her. And so they both reached out to me. They were like, hey, maybe Joe can come in and maybe he could do like some stuff that's interactive with the audience without them having to come on stage. And they called me and I said yes. And I was like, what am I going to do? So I put together a completely no contact, socially distanced 10-minute set last summer. And it worked. And after the summer months, they were talking about doing it again the next year, just in general, because it went really well. There were people come. And the other thing too, like it was also hard to have so their theater seats 175 people. But when you have 50 people spread out in there, the hard thing about that, so the virtual shows, we have to it's hard to get feedback, but at least everyone's on the same wavelength, like with a regular show. If you've anyone who's done corporate events, when they're separated at tables, or worse, there was one event I was doing years ago, like 15 years ago, where the room was split in half and I was on a stage in the middle. So I had to look left to see one audience and look right to see another audience. And there were 2 different wavelengths. Each half would get jokes at different times. And it threw me off as a performer and I had to refocus. And that happens with corporate stuff too, where there's a big space or separate tables. And it was kind of like that because it was hard to get everyone, unified as a single group. So, but that said, I was able to, without going into too much method wise with mentalism, the fact that they were separate groups and weren't all gonna talk after the show and everything, I was able to get away with some stuff. We'll just leave it at that without having to bring people on stage. So it was a fully contactless type thing. I did a prediction thing at the end where people shouted stuff out and it was written on a giant prediction, that kind of stuff. And this year it's lightened up a little bit, but it also helped me over the last few months, look for more material that I knew would be better for that venue for when I came back.
And everybody listens to podcast regularly knows our episodes comes out on Wednesdays, and you're working on a secret project this week as well. Can you share a little detail?
Yes. Speaking of everything opening up and vaccinated and everything here in the U.S., I am getting on a plane on Monday, 2 days from now. I am flying to Austin, Texas to film more Scam Nation with Brian Brushwood at Modern Rogue World headquarters. They're having guests come in, as I think I'm going to be the first. I don't know what order the episodes will air, but I think I'm the first guest pre-pandemic to come stay at the ranch at World headquarters and film for the week. And I know they've got other people planned. I know some, I don't know others. Anyone who's done any kind of filming with this kind of thing knows you bring a set amount of things to film, you film half of it, and then like a quarter of it makes it to air. Pretty much everything I filmed last time I flew to Austin, actually, no, everything I filmed when I went to Austin last time made it to air. And that was just one evening that we filmed. And I'm going to be there for about 3-4 days. This time. So I'm excited to see the compound, walk the trails. I saw a lot of the city last time. I'm hoping I can get into the city and see stuff depending on filming and so forth. But I'm also totally okay with just being outside on 7 acres. So when I grew up, quick, like schmaltzy sentimental thing. When I grew up, my grandparents lived on 7 acres. In the middle of the woods. There was a pond, there were trails. We would go camping there, and it was great because we'd go camping, stay in the tent, but we could also like go up to the house and like, have a shower and like, be inside the air conditioning if it was too hot one day or something like that. And so, but at the same time, you're on 7 acres, there's trails and everything. And in 2012, my grandfather passed away, and my grandmother it was a ginormous house. It was wonderful, but she couldn't be there by herself. And so the house and the land has been sold. So in 2014, and I've desperately missed it. Like without getting too much into therapy, I have dreams about this place all the time. And so like being able to like go to another 7-acre plot of land where you can just walk trails and just kind of get lost and like everything else. Like I am so excited. My wife and I are also it's funny. Like we're like, oh, this will be the first time we're apart. She went up for like a quick weekend getaway with one of her vaccinated girlfriends a couple of weeks ago, just for like the weekend. And it was weird. Like we were like, oh, good. She's going to see her friend she hasn't seen in a long time. I'm going to have the apartment for myself. It's going to be wonderful. And like the second day I was like, I miss Lindsay. So it'll be good to do that. So I can't talk about what we're going to film because I don't know what's going to make it to air and not. I'll say this much. I am planning on sharing some new work on some effects from my ebook Journal of Alchemy, which is still available from Vanishing Ink. I did a limited hard copy run this last year for the first time in years. That's all sold out. But I have some new work on. In fact, when we're done recording, Graham, I'll tell you the one new adaptation that I'm planning on filming. But those will be coming out on Brian's channel. And I'm going to be working on some new YouTube stuff on my YouTube channel. And I've got I finally figured out Instagram Reels. So I think that's going to be the gateway drug to TikTok. So I've got some new reel ideas that I'll be doing on Instagram, and the handle for both YouTube and Instagram is Joe Diamond Live, and my website's joediamondlive.com. Since this is magicians listening, if you go to joediamondlive.com/store, that is a secret web store exclusively for mystery performers. It's on my website, but you can't get to it without that actual link. And I've got some ebooks and digital products there for sale, some digital lectures. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, look that up. I also have a group called the Mystic Circle, Joe Diamond's Mystic Circle. It's facebook.com/group/Joe Diamond's Mystic Circle. I'm at the 5,000 friend mark on Facebook, which is like the lamest accomplishment ever. It's the most inconvenient accomplishment ever. I'll say that much. quick side note. So Tristan got the Merlin Award for Master Illusionist of the Year this year, and they've got the trophy on display in the theater and everything. And when people ask, I've got a world record and everything, but like, it's funny because my line when people ask like, oh, what have you done? I go, well, I hit 5,000 friends on Facebook this last year. Like, that's my accomplishment. He got the Merlin Award. I hit 5,000 friends. But this is a way for me to connect with exclusively other magicians and mentalists and mystery performers. I share free lectures there, tips. And because it's a private group, we can talk more freely about methods and those kinds of things. Like last few times I've been on radio, I have just flat out said, hey, here's the marketed effect I did. Let me talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff. And if there's something there that's mine, or I can share, I share it openly there. It's a fun little hub and community. So
you even
nice.
You even sell some used Joe Diamond props too, which, Joe, we're totally going to have you back on the podcast because we talked about this before we recorded. We got to do something all about wallets. We got to talk.
Yes. We'll do one about wallets. Yes, we'll do that. I'll get my collection together. Actually, this will be perfect because I can justify buying one or two more because it's research. It's research.
Research. Perfect. Yeah. You sold it to yourself. Joe, thank you so much.
And my wife.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us again on Magicians Talking Podcast.
Thank you for having me back. Thank you. Yeah. It's great to talk with you again, Graham.
Great
to finally talk with you, Ryan. I've been a fan for years, and nice to finally virtual.
So nice to connect.
This is the other benefit of the pandemic. Like we can all hang out and jam on the regular. It's been like a year-long magic convention. It's like, are you kidding? Like the magic convention never has to stop now. That's the other benefit of all this. So I love it. Yes, finger snaps.
Yeah, triple snaps, Joe. Thanks, man. And we'll make sure that all the links are in the description, everything like that.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Magicians Talking Magic. I just wanted to remind you all to join the Discord because tomorrow night, Thursday night, we are recording our second episode of Book Club, where we are talking all things Verbal Magic by Juan Tamarez. So if you want to join into that, be sure to click the Discord link in the description of this podcast. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, thank you so much for watching this episode of Magicians Talking Magic. My name is Grimazing. That was Ryan Joyce. Shablazim to Doozle. Meow.